very much for joining us for this interesting topic. It always seems to boil down to funding and financing, even when it comes to something as green as clean energy. So clean technology, it's vital. And extremely vital when we're talking about limiting the global warming of 1.5 degrees Celsius, which is the threshold. But let's be honest, it's expensive. It's not cheap to be clean. And here my panel is going to discuss with us some strategies and some of their experiences on how we can make clean technology maybe more inexpensive and what the solutions are for that. So I'm going to start with you, Karim. You are coming from the sustainability performance and accreditation from the Red Sea Global. You have learned on the job, for lack of better words. How did you, at the Red Sea project, build green infra, deploy green finance, and explain to us, we spoke earlier on an email of solar farms, integrated waste management, sewage treatment plants, and how those were financed. Can you give us some further detail?
Absolutely. So thank you to the organizers. Some of you may know, so the Red Sea Global is developing 2 destinations along the Red Sea. What is unique about the Red Sea, it's very long, it's very pristine, and it's also off-grid. And so from the get-go, and that's about 7 years ago, Red Sea Global decided to go green. It's not an afterthought, it was the thought. That was the genesis of Red Sea Global. And fast forward, I can now speak to that experience. And we've had, I can outline 2 financial instruments. Let's think buildings, that's the demand, and let's think infrastructure. If we look at the buildings, because we are committed to LEED certify all of our hotels and resorts. 16 resorts in the Red Sea destination just in phase 1, eventually 50 by the end of 2030 across 2 destinations. And so that commitment came through a green financing framework, which we have with commercial banks, according to which, just in the Red Sea, we currently have 34 assets, hotels, back of house, warehouses, airport, all of that are now designed to a green building standard, and 8 of which have already been LEED certified this year. So this is coming from a private sector green finance framework. On the infrastructure side, we also need to deploy renewable energy and provide waste management, sewage treatment, etc. And here we chose a different course. We signed a 25-year concession agreement. So this is a build, operate, and transfer concession agreement with ACWA Power. And under that 25-year concession agreement, ACWA Power is providing to the Red Sea Global, we are the guaranteed unique off-taker, many services. So they have built 5 solar farms so far, 400 megawatts, to power our destination. So we say everything is powered by sunlight. But equally, they're providing sewage treatment, desalination, district cooling, and waste management services. And all of that under that 25-year concession agreement, which means we don't deploy capital upfront. They do, and they tap into different pockets and pension funds and what have you. But we are the guaranteed off-taker, so we buy everything from them, all the electricity, all the water, all the treated sewage effluent for landscape irrigation and waste management services.
So is it like a lease program?
So the concession agreement is absolutely, it's a build, operate, and transfer. So we provide the specifications. We know how much we will need, so the demand comes from us. They deploy, they build, and then they have contractors to operate, and now we're going to purchase everything under that concession agreement over 25 years, which is typically the lifespan of solar modules.
Okay, so what are the challenges and opportunities of doing that kind of off-grid environment deployment, completely independent from the national grid?
So that's the beauty, and I think this is the opportunity for us in the context of green finance and climate action. By being off-grid, obviously you have some logistical challenges. It's far away. It's not just in the suburbs of Dubai, right? It's off-grid, which means there's more logistics involved. Another challenge is, because you're off-grid and independent, you need to guarantee everything 24/7. I cannot just switch to renewables during the day and then switch to the grid during the night. I'm on renewables 24/7, so I have to also deploy a large battery storage solution. It could be something else, but in our case, it's battery storage. We have 1,300 megawatt hour of battery storage across those 5 solar farms. So that is obviously quite challenging. And thirdly, on the challenges, I would say it's powering all the infrastructure. We tend to think that we only need renewable energy to power this space, right? Buildings, that's what we see. But in the back, in the case of Dubai, you have a metro line, you have district cooling down the road. So in our case, we also need to desalinate using renewable energy. We want to treat wastewater using renewable energy and provide district cooling using renewable energy. So those are obviously some big challenges. But on the flip side, the opportunity is that we've defined our boundaries. So if we think of carbon accounting, if we think of net zero, we've defined the boundary. We're off-grid. So it's no blurry lines. We know exactly what the boundary of our footprint is, and then we can transform some of that investment into short, medium, long-term emission reduction credits. And we'll talk more maybe.
We'll talk a little more about credits later. Yuyan, let me go to you because China's clean technology, it's developing extremely rapidly and it's had a significant application in the market. Introduce the current status of your technology development in China, please.
Okay, thank you. I think I'm very glad to come here and thanks for organizer to invite me come here to share some information about clean tech development in China. I'm come from the China GPIPC as the Green Partnership of Industry Zones in China. You can call that the GPIPC is a Green Alliance. That's for the industry zones. You know, in China, industry zones is a good model for economic development. I think in 1984, the first batch of industry zones set up in China. Now there are more than 2,500 provincial-level industry zones already in China. So you know, in China, the industry zones is a big place for the clean tech application and innovation. So that's why I come here, want to share this information. Your side is a huge market. I just want to share some information about that. Firstly, in China, there's a positive policy about clean tech. It's so positive, it's insensitive for the incubation and development clean tech. I want to give you some data about that. Only in 2022, about 500 billion yuan in new local government bonds were issued, just directly about the infrastructure and the social welfare project. And about them, about 30% is about environmental protection project. You know, you can see this data, the clean tech is a huge, very good place to apply it. And also in the 2020, the same year, there are total about nearly 300 environmental issue funds which have been set up in China, and 71 ESG themed funds and also have set it in China. The total is about nearly 500 billion yuan. So from this data, you can know this policy just a very good, I think, the promotion. You know, in China, have set up the carbon peaking and the carbon neutrality targets in 2020. And also there are policy framework have set it by the central government, and the local government also make a good work plan for that. So we need the very good clean tech and, for example, the environmental protection, waste recycle, and also for new energy, and also about it for carbon capture. So that's, I want to share this information.
Thank you so much. Oliver, let me go to you, Regional Head of Sustainable Finance at Barclays. Very important. What is the role of banks in supporting clean technology? And explain to us a little more broadly what Barclays is doing about this.
So, I mean, you said it yourself when you introduced the panel, all of this costs money. so you need banks. But I think, when we think about what banks can do, it's not just about deploying our balance sheet and supporting, these things with our own lending, but also, banks play a crucial role in intermediating the rest of the financial system. So, it's our ability to structure transactions that bring in asset managers, that bring in insurance companies, that bring in everything together. That's obviously so crucial. That allows us to amplify what we do beyond just the dollars that come out the door from us. At Barclays, I think we were one of the earlier banks to sort of start on this journey when we made our commitment to be net zero from both our operations, but also our financing activity. And that's really been a sort of guiding light for us, and we're very focused on the pathway to getting there and the interim targets that we've set, throughout this decade up to 2030. But to do that, obviously, we've got to really mobilize ourselves in the right way. So we committed that we're going to provide $1 trillion of green, sustainable, and transition finance by 2030, which is a lot of money. We're looking to deploy that across a broad range of different products. So from everything from the sort of smallest business banking clients in the UK, where we're a high street retail bank, to the lending that we do to large companies in places like the UAE, but also then the capital markets transactions that we help structure for our clients across the world. So, that $1 trillion is obviously a key thing that's driving us. But we've also sort of thought about, well, how can we go above and beyond this? One of the things that we're really focused on is the clean tech, the climate tech space. And a key sort of thing that we spend a lot of time thinking about is, how do we take someone from idea all the way up to IPO? We sort of branded this the green escalator or the climate tech escalator, but it's really that concept of how are you there for a company across every stage of their evolution, and how do you make sure you're designing the offering to them in a way that allows them to seamlessly and smoothly move across that. So, for our retail presence in the UK, very focused on what we can do for SMEs. How can we help someone with a great idea, turn that into a business? And then as they start to grow that business, to build revenue, to bring in customers, how do we support them with everything that we're doing? One of the most interesting things that I think we've launched is we've said, well, we're actually going to put our own balance sheet into climate technology. So we've launched something called Sustainable Impact Capital, which is a commitment to provide, by 2027, £500 million of our own money, off our balance sheet, into the equity of climate tech startups. We've supported over 20 companies. I can never remember the exact number, but it's over £150 million at the moment. And those are companies that range from a whole different spectrum of things, from companies in the green hydrogen space to companies looking to decarbonize aviation, companies looking at how do you do nature positive concrete, and a whole host of other really brilliant things. And not only are we providing that equity financing, but we're also really conscious on how do we use the rest of the bank. So one of the things that I was really excited to do was to bring some of those companies out to the UAE for COP28 and to actually introduce them to our network, to our clients out here. And something we continue to do, to think about, well, how can we actually introduce them to this market to distribute their product? Not just to come looking for investment, but to actually say, here's a solution that we can bring for you. And I know lots of other brilliant ideas that we're working on, but I just wanted to highlight a couple of those for now.
So just coming off of that, we talked about supporting the missing middle. Is that what you're talking about, the entrepreneurs, the SMEs that are starting up, the missing middle?
Exactly that. So the missing middle is, it's sort of similar to the valley of death, if you like, in more traditional kind of tech venture capital. But climate tech has a different angle, because we're not really talking about software. Don't get me wrong, there's plenty of great climate tech software companies, but a lot of what we call climate tech is somewhere between tech and infrastructure. And as a result, it means it's too capital intensive for your traditional VC, for your traditional kind of tech investor, but it's not infrastructure enough for your infrastructure investor who wants, steady cash flows, de-risk technology. They want something that they put money in and they pretty much know what they're going to get out at the end of it. And climate technology is just not like that. So we have this missing middle of capital. Part of building this climate tech escalator is to solve that. Part of launching sustainable impact capital is part of that. And it goes without saying that at the moment it's a very tricky time for climate tech companies to raise money. But it's very promising to see people out here, looking at it, and we are starting to see companies that are getting investment from the Middle East, within the Giga project world. Neom has been an investor in quite a few things, sometimes actually alongside Barclays, in a couple of companies. Various different entities in the UAE have also been looking at it, both sovereign funds and private capital. That's obviously a great start, but it is really this sort of fundamental challenge of, if we're going to scale these solutions, it's not just enough to put in small tickets at a seed or a Series A stage. And it's not just enough to be able to say, right, well, when this project is entirely bankable, you've done your first of a kind, probably done second, third of a kind, the banks are going to be there with debt, we're going to be providing kind of more vanilla project finance. We need to think of ways and sort of innovative tools that we can use to unlock that missing middle. So one of the things that we're working on at the moment is thinking about, well, how do we bring together, again, our network, our sort of, community of clients to look at solutions that we can support, whether that's thinking about, well, how do we bring together some of our clients that might be offtake providers of this technology? How do we bring together insurance companies, obviously ourselves as a capital provider, to structure vehicles, funds, whatever you want to call it, that are going to create that enabling ecosystem and provide different sources of capital. Because I think, we're very cognizant that while there are some great, growth equity funds in the climate space that they've seen this, they know what they're doing, and they are deploying capital, they're not going to be enough. The reality is, and my former CEO at the bank that I was previously at said something excellent during New York Climate Week, which is that this is billions and billions and billions, and we just need to put them to work across every spectrum of the sort of the capital stack.
So coming off a question that you had written and we spoke about on email, what opportunities, this speaks for itself, does Barclays see in the region? But give me some examples.
The region has been a great success story, frankly. If you look at some of the largest renewables projects in the world have happened here. Not only the largest, but the lowest cost. And I think that says a lot. It's very easy to do the biggest project, but if the biggest project is expensive, it hasn't really delivered. So that's what's been great about seeing some of the renewables projects. I think you had phase 5 of the Mohammed bin Rashid solar park, which set the record, and then quite soon after the Al Dhafra solar park down in Abu Dhabi, set another record. And I'm sure that we'll see records continuing to be broken in Saudi as well. We've seen quite a few very low tariffs too, renewables has obviously been a great success story. What I think is going to be really interesting is when we look at that next wave of technology. So we're spending a lot of time looking at the carbon capture space, the sustainable fuels space, which includes obviously things like green hydrogen that get a lot of talk, but also sustainable aviation fuel, green methanol, some of these other probably more immediately deployable technologies than some of the green hydrogen, kind of green ammonia derivatives that we see a lot of conversation about. But also thinking about, how do you develop that sort of green industrial base? When you look at the UK or Germany, for example, you have a lot of legacy industry, but you have a lot of legacy infrastructure that industry is built up around. So that poses challenges. You can't just design something from scratch to fit what is actually a completely different economic model today. You know, a lot of these new industries using new technologies, it's not something you just drag and drop and you put in place. You actually have to build it up properly from scratch to do that. So, you know, the advantage that I think the region has is that ability to say, right, well, we can start from a bit of a blank slate. We can work out, if we were going to design this perfectly, how would we design it? And then go and do that. So I think, you know, if you look at what's been done with sort of, you know, some of the ability to purchase green electricity from the likes of DEWA, and say, right, we're going to have a direct PPA, we're going to immediately move to electrification, and not only are we going to have electrification, we're going to have green electrification. You know, I think that's going to be very promising. I was in New York last week for Climate Week and for the UN General Assembly, and the first event I went to was a big event which had a great sort of UAE sort of footprint behind it off the back of the triple nuclear declaration that was agreed at COP28 last year. And it was around sort of financing nuclear, and Barclays and a number of other banks you know, confirmed our support for nuclear, for the fact that it is included in our case in our transition finance framework, and that we count that towards our 1 trillion goal. And a big conversation was obviously around the growth of sort of, you know, AI and all the rest of it. And whatever you think about AI, we're going to need a lot more data center space just for cloud computing alone, which is happening, which is real. And, you know, whether you think it, you don't have to question whether it's going to be the next great thing. It's something we have today and we use today and we need more of today. That's going to require a significant amount of energy. And the UAE is really the only country that I can think of in any time recently to start a civilian nuclear program that, you know, has been successful, has delivered on time, and has delivered, you know, more or less in line with the costs. And coming from the UK, very conscious of the very public you know, scrutiny of some of our nuclear plants that have taken a lot longer and cost a lot more. So, you know, I think that ability to really say, right, well, let's take the time, let's do things properly, and let's work out how do we design things in the right way, is that benefit that the region has, and that's why we see so much opportunity for our global companies to come and deploy their solutions here, but also for local companies to come up with their own homegrown solutions that are going to solve the challenges that we face.
We'll get back to you, Oliver, on so many interesting topics. I want to talk about Climate Week, because I know a lot came out of that, in particular with the UAE, and I read about the nuclear story. Ashish, let's go to you. Now that we've talked about finance and banking, let's talk about investment. What factors should investors look at when investing in clean tech?
So I think some of the things that we talked about here do mention the amount of capital that is needed for sustainable and clean tech investment. It requires patient capital. Changing their whole ecosystem from what has been very much carbon producing, environment degrading into a much more sustainable requires a whole technology overhaul. So you're developing new ways of doing things, and that requires significant capital investment up front, which is why we're seeing the hurdles that we are talking about, whether it comes to interest rates, whether it comes to the availability of capital. We need a significant amount of capital to turn our whole economy into a sustainable version. So, for example, we at Neovision, we are the only carbon fund manager in the region, hoping to be certified green this month, to be the second green certified fund in ADGM. What we are trying to do is collect all these different technologies and put them in a fund vehicle that can generate benefits and people can invest in at scale. Because scale is very important. Now, if you're generating, for example, carbon offsets or carbon credits, which is the objective of the GFC Global Carbon Development Fund that we're running, people have been doing a lot of single project investing. The lack of understanding about what's going on the ground. We focus on nature-based solutions. There's been a lot of controversy around voluntary carbon credit generation? How do you do due diligence on this? Whether there is greenwashing happening? All these factors that need to be considered by investors when they're making the investment, but don't have the ability to do so because it's such a new space. We try and take away all that headache from them into a single project, into a single fund, that they can rest assured the teams are on the ground. We have our own teams on the ground in various places that we do work. We have our own teams understanding forestry, for example. What is required for a certain ecosystem? What is required for government relations? What is required for community benefit and sustainability and community participation in things? So creating this as a scale, as a fund, in a structure that people understand, and they don't have to think too much about, what am I doing? Yes, I am here investing in a fund that is producing significant return for me. It is a significant cash flow stream that we believe, and we've shown in our past, the track record the team has over 2 decades been generating, but you're also doing 100% good. You're changing the whole, as I said, an economic transformation from a much more unsustainable way of living to a much more sustainable and hopefully a fully sustainable way of living.
It's your carbon footprint feel-good moment when you're investing in a fund that can actually... Does it give you a significant return, though? Are investors getting superior returns? Is it generating returns?
So I have to be careful what I talk about, because it's an approved fund in ADGM, so the regulator might go after me. But I'll tell you something. What if I told you we have give you an opportunity about an opportunity that can produce 20% plus IRR over its lifetime, that is inflation protected? Would you not invest? Okay. And that does 100% good for not just for you as an investor, but for all the stakeholders around you.
Humanity.
So this is what we bring to investors. They don't have to think twice about how they are investing. It's a very traditional structure, but doing the things that will help us in the future and produce return alongside.
Karim, we talk about finance, we talk about investing, we talk about green commitments, green finance commitments, but how and who measures this? I mean, you can tell me that you're doing these amazing things in Saudi Arabia and you're doing this. Who's kind of the gatekeeper in measuring this?
Who's watching?
Who's watching?
Who's watching?
Who's watching and telling?
Yeah. So for any stakeholder to make a decision to go green, and for all the reasons that you mentioned, plus de-risking the business and being, climate ready, climate future-proof, what is equally important is finding that balance. How do we balance the interest of, in our case, the buyer of electricity in this case, and the supplier? So I spoke about Aqua Power for Red Sea destination, but we have a similar concession agreement with Masdar and EDF for Amala. This is our second destination. So how does it look? How do we balance the interest of those two? And that's the sweet spot. Because if the buyer is not happy or if the seller is not happy, that's not good for any kind of finance. So we really have to find that beautiful synergistic relationship. So from a seller point of view, Aqua Power, they obviously want to secure the cash flow. They want to make sure that we're going to buy everything that they produce. And they also want their production to ramp up and to be parallel to our demand. Because when you deploy a solar farm, it doesn't mean the assets are all ready. We need many more years to finish the assets. So they're not on the same train track. And they're going to deploy solar renewable capacity at a faster pace than we can build the green buildings. But at some point, those two are going to connect, they're going to meet, and then we're going to find that cruising speed. And it's obviously a great project reference for them, because then they can replicate this off-grid experience elsewhere. From a buyer perspective, so what is in it for us? One, well, we need to demonstrate and be monitored, demonstrate that we are decarbonizing, we are committed to 100% renewable energy in operations. And this is where metering comes in. and billing. And we need smart transactions between buyers and sellers so that we can disclose to the world and we can be audited on the renewable energy that is produced and consumed. It's one thing to say it, it is something else to do it and to be audited. And that's why we're committed to ESG disclosures. Our annual sustainability report was published back in July. All the numbers are in there. Starting next year, we're going to go through a data assurance exercise, which means external auditors will see how much is being produced. You know, they will audit those transactions between producers and consumers. So all that, it is really critical that buyers and sellers, they find that sweet spot which works for both of them. If one of them is not happy, it's not going to work in the long run. But also another benefit for all of us is communication. We're going to communicate to all our guests, Saudis, non-Saudis, Europeans, etc., that when you come to this destination, this is our commitment to decarbonize. And we have a long-term commitment to demonstrate a low-carbon hospitality destination. On the flip side, everything we said here, it's about the footprint. On the flip side, we also need to capture. So a lot of investment around the world is happening in carbon capture, but we also, as a developer, have a commitment to capture carbon. Not using technology, but using nature. And back to where we started, I said the Red Sea is a pristine environment, and we have to keep it as such. In fact, we want to enhance it. And so that's why we have baseline surveys of all the ecology, all the corals and the mangroves, just like, you know, the beautiful mangroves here in Abu Dhabi as well. And we have a commitment to enhance these mangroves by 50 million trees by 2030. And this is something that we can quantify as well. So we have reduction, and we have carbon capture. And those become future revenue streams for that entire ecosystem.
Please.
Make a point. I mean, we're big supporters of nature-based carbon sequestration, and I just want to emphasize some points. Over the life of our fund, over 10 years, we aim to capture 30 million tons of carbon from the air. The largest, which is about the emissions of 6.5 million cars, that's what they produce over their lifetime. Petrol, diesel burning cars. Now, the largest direct capture, carbon capture plant, which is Climeworks in the US, if I'm not wrong, captures 4,000 tons of CO2 a year. The one that's coming up, I think it's called Stratos. It will do at max, it's considered to be a hugely expensive project, 50,000 tons a year. Nothing compares to nature-based carbon sequestration solution 100%. At scale. Technology solutions don't even come close.
Interesting that you say that. So now you got me on the carbon. We talked backstage about carbon funds in the region. Ashish, give us some information on the carbon funds in the region and carbon credit, and how does that work in particular when it comes to companies?
As far as I know, we are the only carbon fund in the region.
We're going to need to verify that, but I
please,
believe you.
Please feel free.
There
are none. And,
Oliver, are we going to have any comments on that? The only carbon fund in the region?
If there are others, there aren't many others, at least, which I think says a lot.
And I want you to explain to me, and let's bring this from 40,000 feet down to 5,000 feet, what carbon credit is, because this is what's kind of the big chat around companies who are trying to deal in clean technology. And what does carbon credit mean, and what does it mean for stakeholders involved?
Yeah, so the carbon market is divided into two. There is the compliance market, and there is the voluntary market. When you talk about, for example, the EU ETS contracts that are traded in the EU markets, those are compliance markets. So those are mandated carbon emission contracts that are traded there. Then there is every time, so just a bit of background, every time you reduce carbon footprint, you generate a credit. Every time if you are producing more carbon, you can buy those credits so that you can produce more carbon into the air because you're producing
in Europe
emissions.
and America, these are mandated, but in this region, they're not.
So increasingly, many countries, and most even emerging market countries, are committing to regulations that would require companies to comply with reducing their carbon emissions. So It is a slow process, but it's happening. Even here in the UAE, it's happening. Our focus is on the voluntary market, and voluntary market means companies or individuals committing to reducing their carbon footprint. And we don't want to degrow. It's a discussion we were having before the panel, that we just produce emissions by living and doing our everyday activity. What we try to tell, or the message we try to give the wider public and investors is, you don't need to degrow while you are changing. We just need to put that carbon you're producing back into the ground so it becomes a cleaner, greener cycle. Sustainable cycle. That's what we are focused on. What we output in terms of what we sell is what's called a verified carbon unit. So we work with bodies like Vera, who will come and assess our project, who will come and assess how many carbon credits how many GHGs or greenhouse gases we will remove in tons of CO2 equivalent over the life of the project. These are generally very, very long-term projects of 30, 40 years, because there's a concept of permanence when you're doing carbon sequestration. You're not just, taking carbon just 1 year and then chopping down the wood and then selling the wood. No, that's a completely horrible activity to do. So we have to ensure permanence of these projects that we are doing, reforestation projects that we're doing. They're lasting decades, if not centuries. So they're set up in a way that ensure permanence and community participation and benefit alongside with it. And this is all assessed by third-party agencies. We have a third-party certifier that will also validate, one of the big four accounting firms that will verify our green credentials alongside with it. And that what we produce is a verified carbon unit that will be sold through either exchanges or streamed to carbon emitters, those who require or are required to reduce their carbon emissions, but can't because technology takes a long time to catch up.
In particular, oil, gas, and energy. Yeah. Sorry. And Yuyan, you're next. I've got a question for you.
So on that point, the challenge is really how do we quantify again. But remember, we have two opportunities. One is to reduce emissions, green buildings, renewable energy, and the other one is to capture. On the technology side, it's verifiable. We know exactly how much we reduce or avoid by switching to renewables. It's called grid emission factor. You avoid that, whether it's Abu Dhabi or it's Riyadh or it's the Red Sea. We multiply that by the production. It is audited and verified, starting next year. But on the nature side, it is extremely difficult. We would have to sit here for the next 10 years to actually measure the next mangrove tree and the mangrove plantation. Nature-based can do 1,000 times what we can do through technology, probably even more, but quantifying that is obviously open for debate, requires a lot of science, stamina, a lot of verification, and as you said, permanence. So if we're planting mangroves...
You should see the reports that I get for the maths that goes into it. It's literally, I'm not a PhD, but we have PhDs, and we require them to do that calculation.
If you want to remember one unit, mangroves in this part of the world, this is not Pakistan and Bangladesh, so our mangroves are much thinner, let's say, less dense. They can capture about 300 tons of CO2 per hectare. Then compare that to technology and then stretch it. But obviously, you still need to demonstrate it and verify it.
Interesting. And you always see that, in particular, the mangroves here in Dubai, you've got the massive buildings all around them, but they are completely untouched. And I think that this should be something even taught in schools that children need to learn about. The reason why these are so important, it's not just because of beauty. It is definitely part of the thing. Yuyan, let me give a question for you. Promoting green transformation in China, this is particularly what you do in industrial parks. What are your opinions, trends, insight that you can share with us on how clean technology works, in particular in the Chinese market when it comes to industrial parks? You said 2,500 industrial parks you have in one... Put your microphone, please, so we can hear.
2,500 provincial level industry zones right in China.
in one area or in all?
No, all the national
2,500.
level.
So
yeah.
2,500 industrial parks. I mean,
Yeah.
it's huge.
Yeah.
So tell us how that you promoted the green transformation, in particular in the industrial parks.
Yes, I just want to share this. How about the JPFC do? You know, the 2020 year when the carbon neutrality target set already, and we just provide some service for the industry zones, have the industry zones found how to reduce the CO2 and where can reduce that. And we just provide some consulting and help them to find opportunities and also just make linkage with banks, with techniques, and with some service, just join to the industry zones. So I think just Barclays is a very interesting case studies for me, because in China, we just to carry out green financing project. We just to collect a very definitely good green project. How to make assessment? How about greening this project, like green building and some projects? How about the index? How to say this building is green, and the bank can give them very cheap money and give some financial support? That's the GPIPC to do. We just organize some experts to give some the consulting, fund some good and suitable project, like the environment protection project, new energy protection, green building project together, and help them fund very good the financial support. Some support from the central government, some support from the banks, and then just to help to promote industry zones to carry these projects and get very good the environmental performance and economic performance. That's the GPIPC what done. But I think I just want to tell our experts now, I think the standards and the guidelines is very, very important. So I just would like to learn some international standards, the guidelines, how to make assessment about green project. So, and that maybe ESG is a very good concept, but index very important. That's my opinion.
Interesting, interesting. I want to bring it back to Karim, Ashish, and Oliver, only because they're regionally based. Do you think that this region can be a beacon for clean technology, for the funding and financing of clean technology? And then the irony I find, and I hope I don't get in trouble for this, but you know, one of the biggest fossil fuel users is this region. And is it almost like we're trying to make good on what is going on, or we're transitioning because we have the mandates, for lack of better words, in this region to do better and be better? Look, we could talk about clean energy and technology and financing, that it's going to make money and whatever, but it's actually a really good thing to do for the environment and for the future. And I think that's where this kind of a conference like this comes through. So give me your opinions on that.
I would argue that the region is already a beacon for clean tech. One, because the vision, whether it's the UAE or it's Saudi Arabia, is already committed to a low carbon future, eventually net zero. So, and yes, we have the capital, be it oil or from other sources, but I think the wisdom comes from using those resources, such as Norway. They have equivalent resources coming from oil and gas. But we don't really talk about Norway. We consider them green already and they buy electric vehicles. Well, this part of the world is also using oil revenue to decarbonize, investing into the future. And I think where there is a will, there is a way. We've seen tremendous progress. Financial instruments and mechanisms are catching up. But ultimately, any green investment has to make commercial sense. Otherwise, it's not sustainable, right? But if it makes commercial sense to the owners, to the operators, to asset managers, then it's going to grow. So I think we are already, a beacon in the world when it comes to clean energy, but we have to perhaps double our efforts in consuming less, It's not enough just to produce more green. We have to consume less. That's the baseline. And I think that's the next challenge as well.
It is the next challenge. Ashish?
Yeah, but I think the question answers itself. I mean, this region has always been the leader. I mean, there was a vision of the father of the nation when he planted all these mangroves in the country. I mean, whether it was not done because it was required by somebody, because there was a vision inherent in the ruling class of this country. They understood what is required for sustainability. I think that vision is being taken forward. We've had COP28, and we've had other initiatives. We're doing this here, and I think this region has great potential in becoming the hub for both financing as well as creation of new technologies to improve sustainability. I mean, we work in ADGM, and we work consistently with the ADGM Sustainability Group too, and they have a great focus on creating more and more sustainable projects, funds in the region, and we are active participants in this, and we are seeing great interest in this.
Interesting. Oliver?
So I think, I'd start off by agreeing with what Karim said. It already is. If you look at, of the sort of big clean tech projects that have been debt financed recently, there are two that come to my mind. The Northvolt plant in Europe and NEOM's green hydrogen project. There's only one of those which is in the news at the moment because it's struggling, and it's not the one in NEOM. Now, different projects, different technologies, so we can't, you can't compare apples and oranges there, but, that says a lot. There is a success story. There are success stories that are already here. I think, when we think about what this transition, I like to call it energy transitions, plural rather than one singular transition, is going to take. It is going to take discipline. It is going to take a long-term focus, but it's also going to take that ability to constantly be reassessing and say, is this the right direction? Do we need to pivot? And I think that's one thing that this region does do very well, is that sort of constant holding to account, going, is this the best that we can be? Is there a better alternative? And realizing when there's an opportunity and getting the engine, for want of a better word, to move behind it. I think the thing that makes me very hopeful is, it's not just international banks that are driving this on the banking side. Karim talked about the green finance transaction that they did under the green finance framework at Red Sea. That was predominantly local banks. It had one international bank involved. Otherwise it was local banks. And I spend a lot of time with my peers at the banks in across the region, whether it's UAE, Saudi. We haven't spoken about Oman, Bahrain, Qatar. All of these these banks, they're moving. The sovereign funds, the private investors have seen the opportunity as well, and that's really what we need.
Excellent. Oliver, Yuyan, Ashish, Karim, thank you very much for this insightful panel. I really enjoyed it. I hope our audience enjoyed it too. Thank you all for coming. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.